Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Grayson, this is Tech with Me, and today I wanted to talk about the Nintendo Switch. What a great console. It took everything that was great about previous Nintendo consoles, whether we're talking the handheld ones or the ones that you put up on your display, it fused them together and they made what is probably one of the best gaming consoles ever made. When the original Nintendo Switch came out, it was great. Sure, it was a little weaker than some of the other consoles on the market at the time, but come on, this is Nintendo we're talking about. They have always overcome having less powerful devices by having first-party games that ooze a level of excitement and fun that no other game company has ever been able to truly compete with. 2 years after the original release, they announced and released the Nintendo Switch Lite, a handheld console that was about as powerful as the regular Switch, but it only worked in handheld mode. It couldn't be docked. That was fine for a lot of people. It still wasn't the fastest device on the market, but it did what it needed to do, and that was perfect. Another 2 years after that, they announced the Switch OLED. The model once again was equally as powerful, but this time the handheld display was a little bit larger and the OLED technology made it look so much better. But that was it. It didn't render the games at a higher graphical fidelity, it didn't push more frames, it didn't run quicker, the battery life wasn't necessarily better, it just had a better display and better colors due to the OLED technology. The original Switch released March 3rd, 2017. At the time of recording this, it's March 15th of 2023. We just passed 6 years since the original release and it's time for an upgrade. Upon release, the Switch was never a powerhouse, but it did what it needed to do. But now 6 years later, in an age when I can sit on my couch, turn on my PS5 and play pretty much anything at 4K or 60 frames per second, my Switch when docked being 1080p just doesn't quite cut it. And that's not even mentioning handheld performance. While the Switch OLED does give us better color and a boost in looks, it doesn't boost the performance. Let's use the most recent Pokemon as an example. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, while they're fun games, and they really are fun games and probably the most experimental Pokemon we've had in a while, sometimes the textures look like smeary, runny messes. The frame rate could be described as anything but stable, and I'm not the only one that feels this way. If you get online, forum after Reddit post after Reddit post all state the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that Nintendo is exclusively to blame for this. Part of it has to do with the developer's experience making 3D games. Part of it has to do with the sheer scale of the game and the developer's experience making 3D games. That being said, imagine if they had a more powerful console to deal with. Maybe at the very least the frame rate would be a little bit more stable. And Pokemon is not the only game like this. Time after time again, I scroll through Reddit and I see post after post about new game releases on the Switch and them just not running great or not looking good. Now, to be completely fair to Nintendo and the Switch console, a lot of these games are games that came from third parties, but these games should have never been allowed on a console like the Nintendo Switch to begin with. Oftentimes, the first-party Nintendo Switch games that release play and look amazing on the Switch console. And if a majority of the other games that got released for it were able to achieve this, we wouldn't really have an issue. But after almost 6 years, I think it's time for an upgrade, Nintendo. A Switch Pro or the Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever you want to call it. Nintendo fans are ready for a console that can truly hold its own again. And while the original Switch was great, it's been showing its age for a while. In a world where the Steam Deck exists, I think Nintendo needs to knock it out of the park with the next Switch release. It needs to be a monster to be able to compete with anything other than first-party titles. Personally, I think the next iteration of Nintendo Switch needs to start with an OLED display, even on its most basic model. OLED tech just adds so much to image clarity, the color, the contrast, literally everything, that it would be a game changer if every Switch console that releases from here on out used it. I also think it would be great if they made the next Switch a 4K console. Now, I'm not saying that it should be able to run 4K handheld. While that would be awesome, I think that's entirely unreasonable and would be crazy to even ask for. But I do think having the power and the ability to run 4K when docked would be a huge boon to the new Nintendo Switch. And for the handheld mode, while it runs 720p now, and a lot of times that looks okay because the screen's so small, I would love to see that upgraded to 1080p in the next release. I know the Nintendo Switch is fairly thin and light now, and it would have to be a little bit more thicker and less portable for the next release for it to make these changes in power, but I think most people would be willing to make that trade-off for a console that would be able to run more games better. The Steam Deck is a handheld console that can run pretty much any PC game, maybe not seamlessly, but it runs them all fairly well. And sure, they have a similar screen resolution, but performance-wise, the Steam Deck puts the Nintendo Switch to shame. And like I've already said, the Nintendo Switch runs first-party games mostly fine, but for anything else, the Steam Deck runs circles around it. The Witcher 3, Skyrim, really any game that runs on PC, as well as the Switch, runs better on the Steam Deck. Maybe it's not fair to compare a 6-year-old console to a 6-month-old one, but I do think it is fair to say that whatever Nintendo does with the Nintendo Switch or the Switch Pro, it is going to have to compete with the Steam Deck. And hopefully that means we'll see some crazy strides in innovation with the next release. Long story short, I don't think it has to be a huge change. I think if they take everything great that they've already done with this innovative, amazing console and turned it all up to 10, it would be the perfect Nintendo console. But what do you guys think? Is the Nintendo Switch fine as it is, or is it time for a new version? What do you want to see performance-wise in the Switch 2? I don't know what the Nintendo Switch 2 or Switch Pro will look like, but I'm not so patiently waiting to find out. Guys, thank you very, very kindly for watching. My name's Grayson, and this has been Tech with Me.